start.
All right, everybody, welcome. We're doing our first session with our expert, Frank Perez, who will introduce himself in a bit. Frank will be tackling on challenge number 5, which is the on-demand market research on emerging engineering trends. So I'll share, just for the benefit of all of you who have not yet seen this challenge from ANSYS. I'll share my screen here. You'll get a chance to look at it, and then we're going to ask Frank to give us an expert perspective on how an expert would look at this, and what tools, what resources would he be exploring, and then how would he tackle this hackathon if he was a student taking part in it. So our business challenge, again, the sponsor for this is a company called ANSYS. Y'all should look up ANSYS. It is a global company, so look them up. They are offering internships in the summer, so those who can submit an idea towards this, though you may not win, you can certainly win by meeting new people and then networking with the right people and maybe getting yourself a summer internship with this company. Or you can win the cash and take the internship, all right? so encouraging y'all to look at this one. And the challenge description, it's a scientific or engineering discoveries become industry and mega trends following a path similar to this. And then it describes the scientific or engineering discoveries that are made in R&D groups at an academic institution, government, agencies, or private companies. And then it's saying it's looking for promotion of the discovery or market opportunity by the innovators, thought leaders, early investors, etc. Another bullet of technical breakthroughs to make the discoveries viable. Another bullet, substantial investment flows by market players and strategic alignment of their businesses to harness the value of those discoveries. And then it goes on to say there is a lot of information in social media chatter, industrial magazines, company presentations, their SEC reports, etc. Today we have to buy reports from consulting companies specialized in market research. The problem is that these reports are expensive, available for only certain technologies or industry trends, and are created or updated only periodically. So what they're doing there is their challenge is they're looking to get information. Currently, they pay for this information. They're looking for ideas on how can they get that market research maybe on demand. So actually the title says on demand. So they're looking for it on demand and probably not as expensive. So we're going to ask Frank, what would he do if he wanted to get access to market research on emerging trends in the engineering space on demand, not having to buy expensive reports that take place only periodically. They're looking for a solution. So this is where, folks, you want to focus on. Either a web platform or a service that mines the internet, aggregates the information pieces based on relevance and popularity, and presents this information on demand in a consumable form. So think about this. You're becoming a little Google, right? Think about how Google aggregates information and shows information based on keyword popularities and so forth, and then puts that together in an easy to use system or a form. So think about what would that look like for emerging engineering trends. An example that's provided in the challenge here is I input hybrid propulsion or hydrogen as a fuel, an information map on items such as centers of engineering activities, key influencers, people, company, investment activity, etc. is created on the fly. So they would like for you to use any available open source tool to create some sort of a search tool that gives them relevant information and it's on demand. So that's your challenge, that's your task. So without further ado, I'd like to take an opportunity to thank Frank Perez for joining us. Frank is with the Pumps and Pipes group in Houston, But I'm going to let Frank introduce himself, what he does professionally. I know Pumps and Pipes is a non-profit organization, and it's all about solving wicked problems that are around pumps and pipes. So from the engineering space, the health sciences space, medicine, and so on. So Frank, how are you today, sir?
Well, I'm doing good this morning. Thank you, Robbie, for introduction there.
Thank
Um,
you, Frank. Please tell us a little bit more about what you do, and then how would you tackle this problem uh, as our expert?
sure. First of all, good morning, everybody. For those who are in the morning, or good day, you might be picking up this on a live stream. I am Frank Perez with an over 35-year career solving large problems and challenges. I am what you would call a true serial entrepreneur with 13 startups to my name. I currently serve right now as the CEO of a company called S-File Technology that develops machine learning and artificial intelligence based systems specifically for mining through unstructured data. So this kind of a challenge is a challenge that my company deals with daily. As a matter of fact, we build products to try to solve similar challenges like this within the enterprises, as well as synthesize across the internet as well too, for many different applications. So anyway, I think this is an appropriate challenge that I think I can provide some great input and guidance as to how I would approach it from that perspective.
Yeah, Frank. So we would love to, kind of put some method to the madness of a hackathon, right? So if you were just presented this, and now here's the big piece of the puzzle. You have a limited amount of time, right? So this weekend, all students, you have to submit your suggestions or solutions towards any of the 20 challenges. This is one of 20, folks. So any of the 20 challenges before Sunday 11:30 p.m. And then I'm saying 11:30 because I know some of you will miss it, and you'll need that extra 30 minutes to catch up. So technically it's midnight, but I'm gonna give you the deadline of 11:30 p.m. this Sunday to have your completed solutions presented in the Smart Interns platform where you've registered. So Frank, given that we have short amount of time, where would you start? Uh,
Well, the first place that I would start is with the expectations and try to understand what the vision of the challenger basically is expecting to actually see as a result of this effort. And looking at that business solution they're looking for a platform or service that mines the internet. And of course, this is not anything new. Anyone who's used search engines can understand what that is about. But understanding their challenge a little further as they basically are looking to an example they provide, which is you want to input a term or a series of terms, in this case, like a hydropropulsion or a hydrogen as a fuel term. And what's key and critical is the next statements they make. They want an information map. And that's a really unique thing. Not necessarily something that you see out of Google. For those who are familiar with how Google works, as a predominant search engine out there, Google doesn't give you a map. They give you results that I think are highly relevant that are based on past searches that basically other people click through. And their algorithm is not based on, or should we say, their relevance algorithm isn't based on, I want to know everything about that subject. It's about saying, I think you want this. So those are the two differences in those different approaches, which means that you have to do something quite different than what Google does. So this information map, they wanted to basically promote, the centers of engineering activity. In other words, where may this term or a series of terms contextually be being performed or researched or something of that degree. So they want the centers of these activities, which we know is a place, right? They want to know key influencers. So they want to know basically another kind of entity, which are people. They want people and companies that are working on this challenge as well too. They want to know investment activity. So they want to understand whether or not there's any investors, any VCs, any funds that are basically investing in this space right here. And so when you take that about what their expectation is, what you really are looking at is you're looking at a graph of these relationships. You're looking at a graph to understand whether or not by putting in these terms, can you give me a graph of the ecosystem surrounding this specific technology or term or research, whatever they're finding out there, and show me all the people that are actually involved in this space and what they're working on. And when you look at that, you got to come back and says, well, what is like that kind of a system really? And, you know, we think about all the things that are available to us, and ultimately graphs are things that are basically social networks in a lot of ways. So Facebook to some degree is that, only it's really related around, you know, what people, you know, are thinking about doing politics and things like that. So it's not really what they want. So let's look at other social networks like LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is a place that looks a lot like what I think they're looking for. So by looking at what may be influencing this challenger's desire, you probably are looking at something to say, I want to build something like LinkedIn that graphs all the entities, people, places, and things that are related to a series of terms, technology related terms, and then be able to present these things in such a way that you can explore all these individuals about what they're working on, to make some kind of judgments. Maybe you provide some kind of additional feedback, like for instance, is this a hot area of interest for a lot of people? So determining whether or not I might want to build an algorithm to determine how relevant or how hot this is, you know, from the perspective of investors and things like that. So these are the kind of things you might want to consider in your design. How would you do that? So if we agree that that's likely our design, and I'm going to use that as our example, you can create your own designs. You can come to your own conclusions about what the challenger wants. But I'm going to just work through that design effort. I'm going to say, okay, that is probably what they want. What are the components next do I need to meet that kind of design? And the second thing I want to understand is, what do I think is the most critical component that would differentiate my solution from everybody else's? Because the assumption is that we want to create a product that basically everybody wants to use. We want to basically be able to provide these kind of search opportunities in such a way that people find it highly relevant and highly valuable, that people want to come to the product to go basically perform these kind of searches. Now, we see as well too from the business challenge description, when we go about that, is that there really are services that provide these research reports and things of that degree, but they're very expensive. So right away, there's a business challenge here, is how do you monetize this? How are you going to get paid for it? How do you underwrite it? There's another big thing you got to ask yourself, and especially since the part of this challenge is also fairly critical, is that you need to be able to provide it in such a way that it's inexpensive or free, practically free, right? So from that perspective, how can you really substantiate a product, keep it operable? In other words, how do you basically generate revenue so you can support the efforts to go forth in this thing? And that basically indicates that you've got a couple of business models you got to think about. Is this going to be an advertising business model that I'm going to have to promote as well too? Do I have to consider that in my design? And if I do, then that means I have to basically tie metrics to all these things, because ultimately when people are buying advertisements, we know that they're looking for metrics about what keywords people are looking for, how many people are looking at that, what markets are they in, all these different things to find advertisers, or make it easier for advertisers to actually select the kind of words they want to use to maybe advertise against the results and things of that degree. So that has to be taken in consideration, because ultimately no business can run for free forever. You have to figure out how to make money. And so part of these challenges to basically try to see if you can make sure you don't discount these opportunities as well. Another opportunity, of course, could be something like a freemium model, where you would basically provide this for free. But if you want to get into the real details, to go into the graph, imagine a graph of all these related entities, and you want to dig into it, well, maybe you can go one layer for free, and then you start digging into the graph, and you might want to say you're going to have to subscribe, become a member at that point. And so you have to think about how you might want to present this information in order for you to basically monetize it even more. So that would be resolved right up front. Maybe you want to keep these things open so that you have these opportunities to be able to monetize it without basically locking you out. Right now, it's probably too early to understand, because you don't know demand, and you don't know exactly what the context of that demand really is. So keep those in consideration. Make sure that you can do it, but I would address it, because that may be asked of you when you do present. how can I monetize this? Or maybe you can get ahead of it and say, and these are the ways you can monetize this. Either way, you're pitching your solution, and the solution would be very involved. Now, next thing I would do is look at my components that I need. And it's very obvious. I'm going to need basically an indexer. I'm going to need crawlers to crawl the internet where I can target specific locations that I think that are valuable content exists. And then I need to crawl that information and then basically index it and organize it is the first thing I need to do. I need to make sure that I can scale this out. It's not just one crawler, but it could be thousands of crawlers that are happening continuously all the time so that you have the most relevant results coming forward. And then once I crawl things, it's obvious that I'm going to have to extract these entities of information. So I'm going to need some form of some machine learning to find entities, to extract this information. And then I'm going to have to put it into a graph form, assuming I have a graph. In some graph form, I have to decide what graph form I want to use out there. And then I also have to decide how am I going to persist this data. Am I going to use a graph database? Am I going to use a relational database? Am I going to use basically a NoSQL database? These things have to kind of be addressed. And you're looking at scalability because you don't know the demand out here. So you have to assume that you're going to have critical demand. It's got to be highly scalable and elastic to be able to do these things. And your infrastructure you want to do this is going to have to operate in some elastic fashion out there. So these things go into consideration and as you're engineering or designing this system as well too. So right away I define, I need a if you're looking at modern stuff, a microservice architecture that can actually run many of these things in parallel because I have a lot of jobs that are happening. I'm going to have to aggregate and do a lot of different functions. Once I aggregate, I'm going to have to extract entities. Once I extract entities, I'm going to have to link these entities together so that I can actually provide a search result. And once I do all those things, then I have to go back and think about how I'm going to present it, UI. And the presentation is real critical because that's the experience that the end user is going to have. And performance has to be almost instantaneously as much as it could be. It has to basically encourage the kind of exploration you want the users to do because the more the users basically explore, they have a stickiness on the website, which gives you many different opportunities to sell advertisement or to provide great opportunities to upsell them into a subscription and things like that. So all of these things have to go into it, which means that you have to think about how I'm going to deliver that. You probably want to deliver this thing in mobile because really most people now surf via mobile, right? So you've got to take that in consideration as well too. And you know, you've got to now basically indicate what kind of team I need to put this thing together, what kind of resources I'm going to need to put this together, and then what kind of tools are available. Now that I define the components that I need, I would go back out and say, okay, open source tools are preferable. I can tell because that's just what the requester wanted. So now I start simply searching for the tools that can construct this thing as well too. I'll ask my team what experience they would have. Try to leverage as much as you can from your existing team because you don't want to go through a large learning curve. See what the team's experience has, and then start selecting the tools that can at least build a prototype as fast as you can. You want to build a prototype and a proof of concept. That's not necessary to crawl the internet. It's more necessary to show that you can actually construct these things together and then basically provide some kind of presentation of how it would look, a design presentation of how you would basically put these things together in some fashion that the graph basically allows you to explore even further and further and further. And so once I get all that together, then I go about constructing and start constructing, basically mocking up my user interface, but also proving up the fact that we can actually do these things by proving up and finding the effort and the resources of what kind of models do I need to basically do entity extraction. You know, what tools can I use for doing that? What kind of models do I need for inferring links between the relationships with these things and how I'm going to do these things? Do you want to deploy this with machine learn models? And if I do, which ones should I use? Can I actually use a machine learn as a service model that coming off of Google maybe or AWS so that I don't have to basically worry about the infrastructure for dealing with that? All these kind of things will go into your design effort that allows you to rapidly get your product into a prototype fashion as soon as possible so that you can actually present exactly what kind of effort it's going to take to get it done, how it would look, how many resources it would take to do it, and ultimately whether or not you actually address all of the requirements that you think that the challenger is requesting for you as well too. That's in a nutshell how I do it.
That's awesome, Frank. I think you broke it down for us. So I'm going to try to paraphrase, and feel free to uh, to correct me if I got any of it wrong. But I like how you started off the conversation with talking about the tools, but then also where would you get this information from, and then once you've figured that a piece of it out, then you've talked about the UI, where that's now once you've figured out the tools you want to use, the information is the sources have been defined for you. Now bring all that together to visually show that onto a web platform, and think about mobile experience, think about how you would organize these things, think about how you would showcase it so that it's easy to use. You've also talked about on the side that while you're thinking about the UI, think about advertisement or how can you monetize it. So that's a piece that we do have to consider about generating revenue from this the solution that you're putting together. And then you also talked about um, that once you have this, now you have to go back to the presenter and I mean the challenge sponsor, and make it so you can test the model with some of the keywords that they've given, but then also see, does it really work? Does your code really go and work and find this thing, find this information and aggregate it and put it into one form? So, Frank, I have a question for you about sources. So, starting from the first one, where would students go look for all the available information for something like this? Or do they go searching for APIs on the website, or open APIs, or Google Search APIs, Google News, YouTube API? Where would they go to try? So they're not sitting there trying to build up their own database. In fact, maybe they want to utilize these open source APIs, create a developer account, and is where would you go? Is there a website that can tell them that this is all the data sets available to you for that first stage of understanding where the data lives? Any thoughts?
And no, I wouldn't believe that there would be any specific source that can iterate through where all these sources are. You might get lucky and somebody might have done that, but you would have to go search to try to find all these things is what you would try to do. Now, it's not a finite set of sources. Sources are constantly being created every single day. They are, you got publications, technical publications that are basically published every single day. You've got patents that are filed every single day.
Yeah.
This is a dynamic world where there's a lot of potential sources constantly happening. You got new startups starting up, going public, new filings. So what you want to do is you really want to say, let me look at sources and entities that it is by just simply using plain old search. Let's leverage Google, right? Google is a good place to go ahead and leverage that right now. As a matter of fact, it's a great start to find sources because you can just simply go, do a Google search, get a result, and find out where those domains of results are coming from. And then if you're managing those results over time, you might be able to discover new sources over time as you basically perform these searches over and over. And so a key here is to kind of build a bot that does that for you, right? To say, I'm going to constantly go to Google, I'm going to go search different things, and I'm going to basically crawl through there and find those sources and see if any new sources are present from a catalog of sources that I know about already as I'm actually doing these different things. So you want to seed it with some sources you do know, and then you want to test your theory of whether or not you can expand on your own catalog of sources by actually consistently going off and Googling and searching for more results and ultimately basically building on those catalogs. Initially, anybody who has any experience in here know where SEC reports are going to be basically in a specific location. There's a lot of sources for SEC reports out there. You know certain magazines that are out there as well too. Good sources today like Medium's, current social media things like Medium is a great source to find these things. And not only that, they're great sources to find if whether or not somebody's tried to build these things or how to build it. Like for instance, Netflix has a great blog on Medium about how they use microservices to perform all of these things to help people discover movies online and things like that. Those are great ways to learn how other people approach these things and what tools they did. And a lot of times, these well-known companies that you use every single day are very, very open about sharing how they solve these kind of problems, and you can learn from them as well too. I always say that many times the problems that you're facing have been solved somewhere else. You just got to go find who solved it. And if you really want to shortcut your efforts, go find that solution that, and then basically see if you can replicate it and do it again on your own, only for your problem. But mostly, generally, if you can generalize your problem in such a way, you're likely able to find somebody who solved it for some other problem, very different, but at the same time, generally the same kind of challenge as well.
Now, great idea there. So you suggested medium.com. Also, you suggested just start with Google and making sure that you know all of the relevant sources that you need to be constantly looking at, or in your that bot that you create. The bot knows where to go and check and constantly pull information. So one, that creates your database. That's your information that you've collected, and then that's part one. Part two is to now then to take the data and then present it, uh, in a UI friendly space, so a web platform or a mobile app where you present the data that you've collected, and now you're organizing it and showing it to the user. So very good. So let me ask you: is there any sources for academic institutions? Do academics or even government agencies, by nature, make this information available for free, or do they have a place where, is there any particular conference that make available presentation that, as an example, because some of our students may not know that such a data source may exist. So is there one? Can that be put together, or what are your thoughts on for that first one, academic institutions and their data, because you would assume a lot of research coming out of there, right?
Yes, there is. There's a lot of them. So Seltzer does a lot of them like that all over the place. Research databases for doing those things. And so you'll find that you can find some of these things that are available online. The challenge you might be careful about is that they have license restrictions and you can't really reuse your data. So you've got to really be concerned about whether or not you have the ability to use their search and indexing to help you out and do what you do, because those restrictions are fairly strong. And you've got to understand your limitations and hope that you don't put yourself in a situation with some liabilities in the future. So always be careful about things like that. Make sure that you have somebody within your team that understands a little bit more about IP and the risk involved with some of that thing as well too. And validate that you can perform what you want to do in such a way that you don't put any additional risk on your efforts moving forward as well too. But yes, there are a lot of research databases out there that you can use, and you'll find them fairly quickly in your search results because they likely will be the top results that you'll see out there. Edgar, for instance, if you're looking for an SEC database, that's an open source one, free one as well too, that people use to mine SEC filings all over the place. That's managed by Stanford University. So that's a really, really good one. And a lot of universities maintain these research databases and open source them, but you got to be careful because not all of them are open source. They may look like they are, but they have license restrictions, and you need to be careful not to impede on any of those license restrictions as well too.
Gotcha. And a lot of the students may immediately go to the library, use their student accounts, access any of the databases that are at the libraries, and start using that information to curate their databases. But not all of that information is licensed for commercial use. It's only for you as a student. So be mindful of that. But that's good to know. Look, I'll tell you, any business where, if you know what the problems are, you could buy the license yourself, right? If there's enough, those things that can problems could be solved, but it is important to be mindful about them. What other? So point number two there about government agencies and private companies. So where do you think we can find information from there? Do you think something like Twitter and LinkedIn? I think you recommended already. How do you feel about recommending, for or crawling for trends, and then collecting data from people's posts? What thoughts on, or companies' post? Any thoughts on that, Frank?
Well, Those obviously you can identify things from private companies based on investors, right? That's the very first thing you do. There's a lot of lists of investments. You can basically look at how you can find and discover these things by identifying, for instance, all the VCs, all the private equity companies that make investments that like to post their portfolios. And their portfolios are great ways to crawl through and actually crawl through and find those companies, those entities, and start crawling those entities yourself. The challenge is you don't know what you're looking for, right? So when you really think about these things, what you're doing is you're expanding out as far as you can so you can find some relevant results. So this can get very big and very large very, very quickly. You can have a tremendous amount of noise, and finding relevant information from all that noise is a challenge you're going to face. So again, doing these things, are not that difficult to do, to crawl through and then just simply go through them. The difficulty is going to be here is, how do I find relevant content? And how do I determine what's relevant, right? Think about it. By its own nature, something that's very novel and new is not going to be relevant yet to a bigger audience. So your ranking based on how much people's interests are in this is going to really be difficult to do, honestly. So that's one thing I think that indirectly the challenger is asking, how will you determine relevance? Can you define that? And maybe that's the unique thing here, is how you determine relevance on some very novel and new technologies or approaches for things like that. So to me, I would be more interested to see what some of the students would come up with some of those things as well, because I think that's the hardest thing that I cannot really put my finger on, is how do you define relevance and how do you keep this constantly crawling so that you can actually understand the newest things that are coming out and whether or not these things are even probable for even becoming successful or not, right? That will be based on this. And of course, a lot of this is chance, a whole lot of chance. And the key here, of course, I think, and I give you a hint, the way you define relevance is by what people are going to be searching for you for. So if somebody searches my engine for something I've never seen a search before, you should probably try to see, if I see 2 or 3 people, I need to find and crawl resources to those terms so that I can try to provide that content the next time they come back looking for it again. That's one way I think you could do it. Let your audience, let your users tell you what's relevant, because their interest is what should be your interest as well too.
That's a great point. And one way to do this is, if you are, if you're the person that everybody goes to find relevant information. Let's say maybe, what's the best video game card to buy? And if you're the person who knows the information, what's the first thing you do? You go and you look up all the video game cards available to you. You find the specs. You're the individual that's making that decision about which one's the best, and then you're conveying it back to your friends. This is kind of similar, where now someone's asking you, and then you're going out and you have predefined sets of sources that you want to go and check and then bring back the information. And you don't want to bring back everything, because that's too much information. And as Frank calls it, you want to work through the noise and go to the relevant data that's important to the user, because the user doesn't want to sit there and read 400 pages of stats. They want to know exactly what they asked. What's the best one? And that's what you're making a recommendation. So look, if you're a student, one thing you can do that may be different, and now I'm just going to brainstorm here, but video has a lot of merit. A lot of people like videos. So if this company is looking for on-demand market research on emerging engineering trends, and here you are, an engineering student looking to be on top of the latest and the greatest, and you have been doing your research, or your professors have read these magazines. There's all this information available to those who are really interested. Maybe you start synthesizing this information and do a daily report and make a video on YouTube and say, hey, this is what's happening today. And before you know it, you're the expert that people go to on YouTube as the influencer for emerging trends. So maybe you start there. If you're not a coder, if you're not a programmer who can put that together and automate the whole thing with machine learning, if you're not that individual, but you're an MBA, well, guess what? You could use your brain as the machine learning and synthesize the information, and then do a daily report for everybody to see. And before you know it, you'll have 1 million people listening to what you think is the best trend. So Frank, what do you think about that type of a solution for a hackathon challenge like this, beyond just coding and programming? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think what you're saying is you're turning it on its heels here and saying, I'm going to be the influencer and tell you what it is. That's a great idea, actually. And obviously we see a lot of it already, right? YouTube is full of people out there who are being influencers now about what are emerging trends and things like that all over the place. So not only that, but you can use that as a seeding mechanism to drive basically a search engine as well too, because you'll see the interest that people have based on these, on that delivery of content, that video, right? That video can start influencing, provoke ideas. We have a great example last week. Microsoft basically presented their mesh, framework and technology. If people are familiar with that, but it's an immersive, three-dimensional, video conferencing, the next version of Teams. I don't know if you saw that or not, but that just now we have basically Iron Man capabilities, where you have the ability to have people in the same room and things like that. It's kind of really exciting to see that there's platforms for doing these things. Now, I'm sure it's going to provoke a lot of ideas about what's going to be needed when you have these things. What other technologies can actually now be enabled by these kind of things. So these basically invoke ideas all over the place. And you want to try to capture these ideas because some of these ideas become tomorrow's basically big hit, right? Those are the things you want to do. And so what they're really asking is to say, I want to see these ideas and I want to see how they evolve. And you got to have as well too some kind of ability to be a futurist and see what's going to be the thing of the future. This is another challenge that's kind of embedded here. Said, can you create a virtual futurist that can predict these things in the future and tell me exactly what's going to be most relevant? I think of a movie back when I was a kid, Back to the Future, where if you just knew what the future was like, right, you would go back in time and actually be on top of it so you can get very rich, right? In a lot of ways, there's a lot of that kind of baked in here, right? I need to be able to understand the future. And can you predict the future? Because I want to be able to be ahead of it so I can take advantage of it.
Speaking of the future, Frank, I have a question for you here. What do you think? So these reports, there's these companies that this is all they do. They have experts who go curate the information. They gather the information, then they write it in nice little reports, and then they sell these reports for $3,000 or for whatever. They're expensive, right? So there's a price at which they're sold for. What is the future of that business?
Well, that business is being threatened quite a bit right now. For everybody who's really on the edge of what's happening these days. But machine learning is able to summarize these reports and actually recreate them entirely. We talked about the GPT-3 models that are going on there. All these other ones, these fantastic natural processing language and models that are literally capable of writing these reports for you automatically with a bot. And this kind of information now, the summarization of very complex technical things, to put it into a very easily understandable, consumable description of what it is changing a lot of these research things. And that can be your advantage as well too. Getting access to open AI's GP3 models or things like that. And what would you do with it if you did do it? Those kind of things should probably take into consideration and seeing if you can actually bake it into your solution as well too.
That's cool. So think about that. If someone searches for that keyword of hydrogen as a fuel and you built the system that automatically generates the report based on some of the tools Frank shared, and within minutes you populate the report for them. and I think that would be the ultimate solution for our sponsor here. But this is good. So Frank, we've got a few more minutes here, and any other suggestions you want to make for our students? Because I think you've defined the sources they need to write down, the tools that they can use to gather this information. You've talked about presenting it in a nice way. You talked about monetizing. I think keep that in mind. How can they? If they're not an engineering student, if they're not an IT student, any suggestions for them? What degrees or what majors should they be looking at, especially for those freshmen who are unsure, but they know they're passionate about solving problems? What would you recommend for them to look into? And then those who are already in the senior years of their college program, what should they be looking forward to? So give us a both for those who are just starting their college experience, and then those who are about to graduate out of college. What would you advise them, and how can a hackathon like this support either one?
Well, I think it's your level of skills And experience, of course, is going to dictate what you can actually provide. Um, if you don't have any technical skills, you can actually, present it still. You can basically capture your idea in a presentation, put it into a PowerPoint or presentation of some fashion, and be able to express that presentation. Your whole end product right now is basically a pitch, right? You're going to pitch, you got an elevator pitch, you got a proposal, you need to at least somehow or another give the vision of what you have out there and see if people believe in that vision and see if you got it correctly or not. And that, that happens every single day. We see lots of startups that are based on just ideas that are pitched all the time, with people who have no idea how they're going to go build it, but that's what they're getting funding for, because they want to go chase the idea and make it a reality. On the other hand, if you have a lot more technical skills, you may be driven more toward trying to express the algorithm you might be thinking about, or if you're a designer, you might want to express how you would design such a system as well too. So depending on your skill sets, you might want to lean on. Of course, you're building teams, so you'll have a blend of all these things, and you need to just basically divide out the efforts out there and see exactly what you can. Now remember, you're going into a challenge with a small amount of time to get this thing done, so you've got to really put some reasonable expectations of what can be done by the time you make your presentations. And you should always be working on your presentations from the very beginning with some form of demo if possible, but not reliant on the demo, because sometimes you can't get the demonstration working by the time the end of these hackathons do occur. Sometimes you got a good enough team that can do something like that. It all depends on how you contextualize these things. So what I would do is focus on the unique thing that you can provide, that you can offer as part of your solution that nobody else has, and see if you can basically express that as your presentation about why that unique attribute of your solution is the one that basically will make this thing a reality. And so that's what I would focus on the most, because this is a big effort. This is something that doesn't get done in a hackathon. It gets done over a big team with a year's effort. Maybe you can get this thing done, to be honest with you. It's a big effort, but designing something like this can be done in a hackathon period of time.
Well said. And any advice for what majors should they be looking at to be able to? So maybe not this year. So maybe next year or the year later. So these hackathons take place regularly on an annual basis at TiE. So those who shared an interest but they're not going to pitch because this is way over their heads right now. What majors would you suggest for those freshmen should they be looking at?
Well, obviously engineering, computer science, and business degrees are the natural things you would think of. But you should also look beyond that at sociological and psychological majors as well too, because they're very good at providing the kind of input that goes towards user experiences, to understand psychology, consumer behavior, user behaviors, and they're very good at being able to quantify things that people can be interested in. Because in the end, everything, and somebody told me this a long time ago, and I still believe right now, if you're not in the entertainment business yet, you will be, because everything is about entertainment, because people's eyeballs have such short attention spans that you've got to keep them engaged at all times. And so don't discount the fact that there's a lot of opportunities for people who you may not even think of to be involved to help you build a successful solution, no matter how you look at this right now. I'm looking at machine learning efforts, for instance, and all of a sudden neuroscience is very, very important to me to understand how learning works, so we can actually try to determine any new kind of models that simulate biological systems to learn, so that we can try to build basically virtual systems to do the same thing. So you just never know where you're going to be, where you're going to find the kind of solutions that are going to give you something novel, something new to approach something out there. So don't close your mind about who can solve this. It takes a lot of effort from a lot of different experiences, a lot of different disciplines to truly put together something that is very unique and very engaging.
Well said, and I like the fact that you've highlighted, find a team and make sure you are using the team's strengths to put this together. And you also said it's not all limited to computer science and engineering. However, build skills. I heard you say that a couple of times with these hackathons, the skills you want to develop. So we offered about 7 boot camps, everything from how to use IBM Watson to create an AI chat, to what is blockchain and how can blockchain be used. so on. So go watch those videos. If you missed those bootcamp videos, go back and watch those videos because they will help you build some skills. And then, as Frank says, edutainment is the new word. So it's entertainment and education in one. Entertainment is important. So how you present, how you showcase the information, and I think he even highlighted the importance of the UI, which is the user experience with the data. So make sure you pick members of your team that have these skills. You're allowed up to 4 team members for the hackathon, so use the team building activities that we did the other day was all about getting to know who else is taking part and what does each person have to offer. And then those of you who are on the senior side who are looking to graduate this year, Frank, any advice for those students who are already about to graduate out of university or college, and how can a hackathon like this support their future goals? Why should they take why should they even submit anything at this point? They're about to graduate. Any thoughts on why these experiences are important for students?
Yes, obviously, there's a lot of really good value in it. First of all, building your network is a very, very big value. And hackathons allow you to basically now interact and work with people that you normally wouldn't work with if you don't have experience. So it increases your network of people basically that you can expose yourself, your skill sets, and everything else to as well, and also learn from them in the event you might need those kind of skill sets within your career as you proceed forward. The second thing is as well too, from my perspective, is that it's a learning experience. And one of the things you should know by now as you're graduating is that learning never stops. It's constant. And you're going to have to always challenge yourself to learn, especially in this rapidly changing world. Continuously learning is the only way that you can actually guarantee that you're going to have relevance and you're going to have value throughout your career. So these hackathons challenge you to learn something that's outside your normal comfort zone, outside your box, to learn how different things work and how different people think. And then ultimately to learn how to work with people as well too, to express these things, how to collaborate, and how to basically build teams, which is a very important part of these hackathons, because you have these short period of times to solve some very complex problems. And if you don't basically come together as a team, you're not going to really find a solution.
Well said, Frank. I think you hit it on the nail there. Networking and getting to know, sharing your skills, and then also learning about other people's skills, and then using it. So this is great, Frank. How can folks get in touch with you for bouncing an idea off by email, or are you on social media where they can students follow up with you for any type of advice?
Well, I think my LinkedIn address or my LinkedIn page is there. They can certainly connect with me with a question as well to indicate to put TiE Houston on it, and I would certainly respond via that. That's great because it comes out right on my phone, right? So it's always good for me, my mobile device. And as long as I see the TiE Houston heading on it or somewhere in there, I'll respond and try to get people some feedback as soon as possible. But certainly you can also email me directly. But any one of these things are available as well too. So if you need some advice, if you want some input, or you just want to, toss an idea out and get my input, I'd be happy to do that for you.
Frank, thank you so much. One, for the expertise here, for the guidance on how you would tackle this. Two, for suggesting where they should focus their time and energy. Three, for telling us the importance of having a team and then using your strengths and using strengths of others. And then lastly, telling everybody to network because that's the idea here. So appreciate all the wisdom that you've shared with us. And then lastly, thanks for agreeing to mentor any of the students out of the hackathon for the next 2 weeks here as they're working on these things. If any of the students make it into the finalist realm, we will make sure we will have a special call for any mentors you want to talk to. We'll do whatever we need to bring all of them. So to really help you, once you're in the semifinals, we get to work with teams very closely and help them with their presentation, their platforms, and so forth. And then if you're in the finals, then we'll do whatever we need to do from Houston to get you to persuade the sponsors to give you the $15,000 cash prizes, and then obviously we want our students to get those internships as well, that are being offered. But nonetheless, Frank, I want to thank you for your time and offering your mentoring to our students. Any questions for us, Frank, as we are preparing this weekend for a TiE Global Hackathon?
No questions for you. You guys are doing a great job from what I could tell. All I want to say to the hackers is have fun, enjoy yourself, and happy hacking.
Happy hacking sounds great. Thank you.
Welcome.